All right, we're live video. You can start. Video, go ahead and, move your mouse too off the side.
Tell me, what is going to ensue in the zoo? My people are dying and going to jail too. Plus, their one is gone, but it's a war zone back home. They want to build a wall, but they have tunnels and drones. You're only keeping out the weak that seek the American dream and letting in the strong. They only want to do wrong. No, I ain't crazy. I'm just a so-called anchor baby. I'm just trying to change the status quo, going toe-to-toe, because how can a stranger hate me and let their anger take me across that line to a land I never knew? I've been climbing up, trying to get a better view, but all I see is the real grande, and I feel that divide isn't big enough for us not to find common ground. No, I ain't calming down. I just seen a father and his daughter drown, plus my whole family can be deported. My whole reality can be distorted. I just pray I don't lose my sanity going through this torment.
I guess it's true when they say that apple doesn't fall too far from its tree. Rotten, as if I had an option. I was born into this family line of criminals, waiting for the day that my cloak will no longer be invisible, aiming for the bigger picture but only catching tiny fragments of the ricocheting bullets. Sleeping on tall floors to keep cool some nights in the middle of that darkness, just like I slept in a small locked room to hide from the harsh reality of the heartless. For too long, I was stuck down in that bottomless pit, where being numb, alone, and hopeless was the reality of it. Forgetting that God was my pit, helping me grow and be fruitful, despite where my roots go. I always learned to forgive myself. I tell to my past self. Sitting here sketching out my life to be continued for now, then I ask, who am I to you? Who am I to those that I once knew? Who am I to me? More importantly, I think it's what I cease to see. Lord, help me, please. Get me off this Ferris wheel of doubts and uncertainties. I need you, please.
Hi y'all, my name's Stephanie Gomez. I am the high school voter registration campaign coordinator at the Texas Civil Rights Project. It's quite a title. But I'm very excited to talk to you all today about the work that we're doing across the state with our partners to ensure that Texas youth are active and engaged members of our democracy. So for the past 6 years or so, the Texas Civil Rights Project has been a leader in boosting statewide compliance in Texas with the high school voter registration law through the work that we do with our partners and by leading public awareness campaigns about the law to make sure that everyone knows about it. So before I really get into it, I'm just gonna give some quick background on the law, what it is, what it entails, so we're all on the same page when I talk about high school voter registration in Texas. So, we have had this law since 1985, which is quite a long time ago. But you know, this is a wonderful law that we have in Texas, a state that's not known for having a lot of wonderful laws, right? That requires that every public and private high school in the state to distribute voter registration applications to eligible students. And so under this law, the principal of a high school is the high school deputy registrar, which essentially means that the principal has the authority to register students to vote, and anyone eligible in the school, they can register them to vote, and they can appoint a designee and put that person in charge of the voter registration efforts. It doesn't necessarily have to be the principal, but the school has the responsibility to provide voter registration efforts at least twice a year in every Texas high school, public or private. This is a great law, like I said. Like this is a good law. This is a progressive law. This is a law that makes logical sense. And it's a law that, you know, a lot of people can get behind, right? That from the earliest possible moment in a country where we really value the importance of our vote, that our schools and our communities are working to make sure that young Texans are being taught about the importance of their vote, and the importance of how to register to vote and being given the opportunity to register to vote, and are given all the necessary tools and knowledges and resources to make sure that they can actually get to the polls and cast a ballot. The Texas high school voter registration law has the potential to make Texas a leader in youth voter turnout and registration. And that's significant, right? That Texas could definitely be leading the country in this way. The problem, and there is a problem because we're in Texas, the problem is that the compliance rate for this law is nowhere near where it needs to be or where we want it to be. So we knew that there were some efforts by schools to stay compliant with the law. So the Texas Civil Rights Project began tracking compliance and publishing reports on what we found. And we were examining whether or not high schools in Texas were taking the first step to become compliant with the law through requesting voter registration forms. So in 2017, quite a while ago, but not too long, in 2017, we found that only 14% of Texas public schools had taken that first step. It's not a great number for our compliance rate with the law, right? In 2018, we found that the compliance rate had more than doubled to 34%, which is still not a great number, but definitely, like, that's a significant jump to double your efforts. It definitely came because of a lot of efforts and a lot of attention that our partners are putting on this issue. But still, like, the compliance rate is nowhere near where we want it to be or where it should be. So we're not giving up our efforts, right? We have seen that the compliance rate in Texas increased because of the work that our grassroots organizations in our high schools were doing, right? And that they were being strategic in their efforts to provide voter registration to young Texans. So we have to continue that work with our partners. We launched the Own Our Vote effort, right, which is a coalition of over 24 amazing grassroots partners who are dedicated to high school voter registration, in order to make sure that the schools, that our organizations are continuing to go into schools and provide voter registration and voter education. At the same time, sharing best practices, collaborating with other organizations, and making sure that we're doing everything we can to help close the gap in compliance, because there is a significant gap. This is essential work, right? Our partners have been working for the last couple of years to build relationships in Texas communities to ensure that we are doing the necessary work to ensure that young Texans are able to be engaged in our democracy from the very moment they're able to. Our partner organizations, reach out to schools in order to schedule time with students. And this can take a bunch of different forms, right? There's like no one way to do this. It can be an assembly with all the seniors. It can be tabling at an event, or it can be coming into the classroom with curriculum on voting and civic engagement and taking time to answer the questions that young Texans have, or something else, right? The importance is that our partners are taking creative avenues to make sure that our schools and our communities and our students have the resources that they need to be active and educated voters. So we have all this amazing work, right, that's being done by organizations that are really investing in the future of our state. But we still have the question, right, of why compliance rates continue to be low. There's a couple of reasons. I think a very significant one, right, is that the Secretary of State, who is also the Chief Election Officer in Texas, for some reason has not and does not prioritize high school voter registration. Even though for years, Texas Civil Rights Project and our partners have continued to bring the issue of very low compliance to their attention. And it's not like we're asking for much, right? We're asking that they do whatever is in their power as the Secretary of State's office to ensure that schools and teachers and students are being supported in their efforts to stay compliant with the law. And very much stressing that we can't continue to overburden our schools and our teachers who already provide so many necessary services to our communities, right? And that if we really, really believe in participatory democracy and that we really believe in the importance of our vote and creating a culture of civic engagement in our state, then we need to be taking common sense measures to help out our schools so they can register our students, right? An example, proactively sending out voter registration forms to all of our high schools instead of waiting for the high school to put a request in or to opt into this work, right? Sending the forms could take care of a lot of issues, right? But that's very much a concern, right? And it is concerning that our Secretary of State isn't taking the steps necessary in order to make it easier for young Texans, our high school students, to register to vote in their classrooms. Like, that is an issue. And it's not really just an issue, it's bigger than that, right? It's a form of disenfranchisement. There's research that shows that that if young people vote in the first 3 elections in which they are eligible, they are significantly more likely to be civically engaged lifelong voters. And that's something that we want for a healthy state, right? It also works the other way too, right? If a young person is not voting in the first elections that they are eligible, they are likely to become non-voters for good. Why would we want that? Like, why would the Secretary of State want an outcome like that? Like, how could Texas possibly benefit from having an entire generation of people who are not engaged and not paying attention to the importance of their vote, right? So again, Texas has this really great progressive law for registering young people in schools, and it's really such a quality intervention, but we can't forget, right, that part of the reason why it's so hard for Texas to be compliant with the voter registration law is that Texas leads this country in voter suppression, and including the suppression of young people, right? In 2018, we experienced some of the highest voter turnout that we have seen in 50 years. But the only election law that was passed in this state was HB 1888, which outlawed mobile voting locations on college campuses, which directly affects the ability for a lot of young Texans to cast their ballot, a lot of them who were just out of high school. And there's already so many barriers in the state that disproportionately affect a young person's ability to vote. Remember, just getting registered is obviously an issue, but let's say you're registered, right? You're registered to vote, you're eligible. Transportation can be an issue for a lot of Texans. Like, can you actually get to the polls in a timely manner? IDs are another big one that comes up. Like, do you have one of the appropriate IDs to actually cast your ballot once you get there? You can't use your student ID, which is the ID that a lot of young people rely on. Like, what is the point here? Like, is the point making it difficult for young Texans to exercise their right to vote? Because that's what it feels like. And honestly, if anything, young Texans should be prioritized, I think, in voting in civics education. High school voter registration matters because Texas youth are the most invested in Texas's future. Like, it's their future. It is self-serving that Texas politicians would choose to not enforce a law that we've had in this state since 1985. The law is older than me, right? That lets young people register to vote in their high schools and then continue to promote this narrative, right? That young people are young people are apathetic, or that young people don't care, or that young people have no interest in voting. That's not the case, because again, young people in this state have the greatest stake in our future. And we know that this young generation of Texans is more diverse than ever before, and they have just as much of a right as anyone else, including those who are currently in power, who benefit from suppressing the vote, to shape the future of our state and really this country. And young Texans very much care about issues, right? When I talk to our partner organizations, it often comes up that in instances where our partners are invited into the classrooms to facilitate some sort of discussion with students, the conversation oftentimes turns to discussions on the issues that young people want to know more about or discuss and share their opinions on. And it's issues like climate justice and environmental justice and sustainability that are very much topics that young people care about, and that they need to know that exercising their right to vote is just one way to create the systematic change necessary to address these giant issues like climate justice that are very much intertwined with our ability to plan for the future. And young people, and in this context, young Texans, have the greatest interest in making sure that our Earth is well taken care of. The next generation of young Texans is going to be tasked with making decisions that will greatly affect whether or not we're going to have an Earth that we can live in the next couple of decades. And there's a lot of ways to contribute towards creating a safe future for our Earth, but that's also something that can't happen without dedicated voting, right? And healthy voting patterns. Young Texans need to demand that we have safe, sustainable, and healthy communities in the coming years. the issue of climate change is one that's massive and that will require collective action on a bunch of different fronts. But young voters need to be engaged on the issues like what transportation looks like in their cities, or how inaction on climate change affects Black, Indigenous, and communities of color disproportionately, or that continued inaction on climate change will only further intensify the inequities faced by historically marginalized members of our community. Voting is just one tool, but a significant tool that can be used by young Texans and young people across the country to make sure that our federal, state, and local policies are actively working to solve the issues that have been brought upon by climate change. And young people, specifically seniors in Texas high schools, are constantly thinking about the future and what it holds. The entire high school experience, at least as I remember it, which wasn't too long ago, right? But still, the entire high school experience is really about preparing yourself for the rest of your life and doing everything that you are able to try to build the best future that you can for yourself. And a lot of us, because so many barriers exist, and because the condition of the world is what it is right now, it's very easy for us to believe that our votes don't matter in the grand scheme of things, and that there's no reason to go into the trouble of making sure that we can vote. But again, these big issues, these giant issues like climate and environmental justice are going to require that we come together and make sure that we're being heard. And a really great way to be heard in this country is by exercising our right to vote if we are able to. And, you know, if we really think about it, a lot of our major wins for climate justice have been youth and student-led. And I think that most young people are aware that the future and our Earth's future really depends on this generation demanding that we prioritize building safe, secure, and sustainable communities, and that we continue to push that momentum throughout the year, right? Regardless of whether or not it's an election year or not. We have to make sure that we are, again, developing healthy and consistent relationships to voting, and that we know we know when we can and cannot go vote. But we can't really get there, right? We can't get to this situation where we have healthy voting patterns unless our state takes the time to invest in voter registration. And like I've said, we have this really great law in the state that will allow us to ensure that the next generation of Texans are registered to vote as early as possible and are provided the necessary voting and civics education that they need in order to feel comfortable contributing to our society through voting. Advocating on behalf of Texas's high school voter registration law and making sure that the powers like the Secretary of State, the Secretary of State's office has, are actively investing in high school voter registration is essential towards making sure that young Texans are prepared to start leading our state and leading our country's future. So that's what I have for y'all today. Thanks for tuning in. Hope y'all have a good one.
So today in our second portion, we are going to be having two featured speakers. First, we are going to have Sri Preston Kulkarni, who is the Democratic nominee for U.S. Congressional District 22, and also Diana Martinez-Alexander, who is a Sunrise Houston endorsed candidate for Harris County Commissioner Precinct 3. And we're also actually going to have a third speaker, who is Natalia Cornelio, and she's going to be tuning in to speak to us about Indigenous youth and also climate change and voting. So I'm going to be the interviewer for today for the first two parts. And I am a junior at Glenda Dawson High School, part of the core team of the Youth Climate Strike organizers in Houston, and a team lead for the regional leads working to integrate the suburbs of Houston into the climate movement. Our first speaker is going to be Sri Preston Kulkarni, who is the Democratic nominee for U.S. Congressional District 22, one of the most flippable districts in the entire country. He ran for Texas 22 in 2018 against incumbent Pete Olson, changing the district from safe to contested. Sri is a Houston native, a graduate of UT Austin, and attended graduate school at Harvard. He spent 1 year in the U.S. Senate, working under Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, focusing on veterans affairs, defense, and foreign policy. He also spent over 15 years in the Foreign Service under the State Department, working overseas in Iraq, Russia, Israel, Taiwan, and Jamaica. He worked on countering Russian disinformation in the Foreign Service and resigned in 2017 after Trump came into office.
All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Sri Preston Kulkarni, and I am the Democratic nominee for U.S. Congress in Texas's 22nd District, which is just outside of Houston. It's the suburbs here. I'm originally from Houston. I went to University of Texas at Austin. I did my grad school at Harvard. I spent a year in the U.S. Senate doing Veterans Affairs, Defense, and Foreign Policy for Senator Kirsten Gillibrand. But most of my career, I was overseas, almost 15 years. I served as a Foreign Service Officer in the State Department. So I served in Iraq, I served in Russia, I served in Israel, I served in Taiwan, Jamaica, and I did countering Russian disinformation at the State Department until 2017 when I resigned to come back home and run for Congress because I didn't think I could serve in the Trump administration when I didn't think the Trump administration actually represents me or any of us. So resigned, came back and ran for Congress, almost won in 2018. And now this time my congressman decided to drop out of the race. So it's an open seat, one of the best opportunities for us to make positive progressive change in the entire country. And now I'm the Democratic nominee going to November.
Yeah, so we're really excited to have you guys. So for those of you viewers who don't already know, she's running in Texas 22, which is one of our most flippable districts. So we are really excited to have him speaking with us today to a bunch of youth climate activists because, as you guys know, today's live stream, Friday's live stream is centered around getting out the youth vote. We're really excited to be engaging young voters and voters of all ages from across Houston, across Texas, and across our entire nation. So with that, Sri's campaign has been doing a lot of amazing work on voter registration. He probably has one of the highest voter registration goals that I have ever heard of out of any campaign, and it's been groundbreaking work. And so in this new time, we wanted to have a discussion with you guys about what youth voter registration is and why it's so important for us. So our first question is, what youth voter registration and engagement strategy is your campaign focusing on for your election, and how has it been adapted to the current COVID circumstances?
Sure. So that's a great question to start out with. Now, just to go back a little bit in terms of what we're doing with voter registration, Texas has one of the biggest voter registration problems in the entire country because they make it very difficult for us to vote here. Unfortunately, the Republican Party thinks that if fewer people vote, then they'll win, and if more people vote, they'll lose, which I think is a terrible strategy. I think they should probably focus on trying to bring more people into a coalition. So what we did after 2018 is we actually brought together a group of 32 organizations from around the greater Houston area, especially different groups that work with various ethnic and linguistic and religious communities. So we showed them how you could use an online real-time updated map to go neighborhood by neighborhood. And if you come to a house, for example, where they speak Vietnamese or Spanish or Urdu or Hindi or any one of these different immigrant communities, and you don't speak that language, you can tag them so that somebody else will come by afterwards from one of those organizations that deals specifically with that community. In our district, we have registered since 2018, where we lost by 14,000 votes. We've already registered over 40,000 votes, over 40,000 voters between the November 2018 elections and the March primary. So we're on target to register over 60,000 before we get to the November elections this year. To put that into context, the entire state of Texas, Ted Cruz won the state by 214,000 votes. So we could make up more than 1/4 of the entire Texas state margin for Ted Cruz just in this district. So that voter registration is huge. Now, when you talk about what we need to do for youth voter registration, it's a little bit different because it's not just about going house to house, especially for these 18 to 22, 18 to 23-year-olds. When I go to a house and someone voted, someone is not registered and they're 19 years old or 20, a lot of times they're not in that house because they're off at school. And so in order to get those folks registered, we try to do voter registration drives on campuses. But right now in the COVID-19 situation, a lot of those students who would be at their campuses are back at home. And so it gives us a special opportunity to try and register as many people as possible. While we don't have online voter registration, we can request, we can actually request voter registration applications be mailed to us. And we actually know that there's several groups that are working in conjunction with us to mail out voter registrations to over 1 million Texans who are unregistered right now. So the first thing that we need to do is make sure that youth know whether they're registered or not, and especially if they're registered back in their home county. So if you're registered in Fort Bend or Brazoria County, that makes a big difference in this election year. And then secondly, on top of that, when you do get registered, we want to make sure that people get an absentee ballot. So the biggest way to do both of these things is to network with your classmates or former classmates if you went to high school together over Instagram, over Twitter, and find those people. So if you're a registered voter, we can give you lists of people who are your age who are registered around that high school. If folks are not registered, we need to make sure and get as much of that information out to them as possible on social media so that they are registered and they're registered in the right county, because every time you move counties, you have to re-register. And so all of that is going to help us for November 2020.
Yeah, that's really exciting. We're actually we're doing something pretty similar with, we're partnering with Move Texas. So they're the ones who also do something similar with if you can fill out all the information online, then they'll print it and then send it to you, because not everyone has a printer, and then you sign it and mail it back and they'll put it in. So it's actually really exciting to see that we have some pretty similar strategies there.
And there is also a site, register2vote.org, that was started by Jeremy Smith. And the whole point of that is that we have a digital record of everybody who tries to register. So what happened last cycle is that at Prairie View A&M, they tried to register a lot of students on campus. And then when they went to vote, oh, I'm sorry, there's something wrong with your registration. Oh, the address is a little bit off. And a lot of students were prevented from voting. But it just happened to be a coincidence. This is an African-American majority school, historically black college. Maybe it was a coincidence that that happened, but with Register to Vote, if you go on the site, they will send you an application, but there's also a digital record there so that if you're not in the system 30 days after you should have registered, they will know. And so they can go out and make sure that they send something back to the student at whatever your address is, whether it's at home or on campus, to make sure that that gap gets filled. And so we don't have students trying to vote in November and then being told at the last moment, oh, I'm sorry, it's too late, better luck next time. We want to catch that way ahead of time.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. So our second question would be, so what is your message to young voters around Texas? So we know that young people more than ever before don't associate themselves with a party that they identify more on issue-based voters, and seeing as this is a climate live stream. What is your message to everyone who would be watching this right now?
So my message to y'all is this. I know when I was your age, when I was voting 20 years ago, I did not feel like a Democrat or Republican either. And you don't have to associate yourself with a political party, but you do have to think about the issues that you care about. So if you care about climate change, think who is actually going to do the most to advance your issues. But the biggest message that I have for young folks is, look, if you feel like there's problems with the system, and there are huge problems, the problems with our campaign finance system. So these lobbyists are the ones writing the laws. There's problems with our voting system. There's problems with election integrity right now, and the Senate is not allowing us to do anything to try and protect our elections. There's massive problems in the entire system. The biggest thing that you can do to shake up the system is to get your friends to vote. And the reason I say that is because every election model, every forecast out there, every predictive system they have depends on young people, especially people under the age of 25, not voting. That's what they based all their predictions on. So if we had a massive surge of young people coming out, people who care about climate change, people who care about gun violence, people who care about basic equality across the country, if you all just show up in huge numbers, you break the system. So that's a really powerful thing. I think that it doesn't force you into this category of associating yourself with a political party. Rather, you are change makers. If you want to do that, then you have the opportunity in your hands. It's not about whether it's good to vote or bad to vote. It's about actually shaking up the system. And you have a bigger opportunity than anybody in those older generations if you use it.
So this surge of young voters that we're hoping for, are you personally hopeful for this surge of voter turnout in Texas in November?
Absolutely. And I'll tell you, look, So some of the places where you have, these red to blue districts, places where you can flip them and make change, they say, well, you have to be more cautious. You can't really advocate for, bold ideas. But I was talking to a congresswoman in California, Katie Porter. So she's in a district that actually flipped. It was one of the most conservative districts in the country, and she flipped it, but she did it on a progressive agenda. And how she engaged young people in her district, that group of under 25s, almost 60% of them voted in 2018. So think about that. In our district, only 26% of people under the age of 25 voted. We've seen what happens. We've seen it happen in other states. And so right now, Texas is becoming younger and it's becoming more diverse. Those two things in combination, and college education is the other big thing. In our district, we have over 50% college education. All of those things are the perfect storm for making a big, bold change in this state. And if we change Texas, then we change the entire country. So I'm really excited. And I'll tell you, you saw the massive difference in turnout just a few weeks ago in the primaries. On the Republican side in our district, turnout dropped by 10,000 votes from last cycle, whereas on our side, it increased by 35,000 votes. I'll tell you, where it started was 30,000. So that means we more than doubled our turnout on the Democratic side. So I am extremely optimistic. I'm really hyped. I'm really positive on Texas, because Texas is where the change is going to come. It's going to affect the entire country. I mean, right, especially in these suburbs, by the way. So most of the kids who grew up and went to high school in Pearland and Sugar Land and Katy and Friendswood and Clear Lake, if y'all are out at school right now, those suburbs literally hold the fate of the entire country in your hands, because the Texas urban areas are very blue. The rural areas are very red. But these suburban areas, they are reddish purple, but they have so many people. Our district has more people in it than any other district in America because it's grown the fastest. So that means that if we just shift that margin from reddish purple to bluish purple in these suburbs of Houston and Dallas, that's enough margin to flip the entire state of Texas. And if you flip Texas, you change the course of American history. That's what we're talking about.
Absolutely. Like, I completely agree with you. Like, I like to think of these areas as just like where, like, the backwaters of where like blue hits red, and it's just like a complete mess of like growth and diversity and all of these different people mixing together from urban to rural. And you walk over next door and your neighbor has like a cow and he has a field, but then you like go the other direction and suddenly you're like in an urban area, and it's completely different. And so, like, with that, like, seeing all of this, like, change and, like, hoping for all of this change, how can activists like myself and, like, everyone else who's engaging with us, like, how can we make climate change a winning issue this November?
Sure. So, and by the way, all this diversity that you talk about, that you love here, that's what I talk about too. When people ask me, what do you love about Texas? I say, I love the fact that we have, cowboy boots and barbecue ribs here, but we also have, pho and curry, and we speak 100 languages, more than 100 languages here. That is Texas too. And it's really cool because this is my state and we look like what the future of America is going to be. I mean, it's honestly the thing I'm most proud of about Texas. But in terms of what young activists can do, we know that climate change is the biggest global challenge. And up until now, for a lot of people, this was a matter of, oh, well, you're fighting for jobs or you're fighting for the environment. And that shouldn't be a choice. But the difference right now in the COVID-19 crisis is, I mean, as you saw what happened with the oil and gas industry today, just today, actually, while we're filming this, the price of oil collapsed to negative. It literally, they have to pay people in order to take their oil off their hands, which is, I mean, it's crazy that this is happening in an oil and gas-based economy. What it means is there's an opportunity for huge change right now. If people really go out there, they put pressure on lawmakers that they know are sitting in positions of power right now, and say, look, we can have a better future right now. We can actually have bold, progressive change on climate. But secondly, the ones who are not in power, if they're people who are supposed to be representing us, who are sitting in those positions, but they're not, go out and make sure you get people elected who will actually make those changes. That's the biggest thing. And I was so proud we had so many young people involved in our campaign, like you, Vidya, and like so many other of your classmates and people across this district and people across the country, honestly. Right now, what COVID-19 is showing us is that even if you're not in a district like this where you can make that change, say you're in Wichita Falls, right? But you care about climate change out there. Well, you know what? You can do exactly the same work as someone here in Sugar Land or Pearland because everybody's working virtually right now. All of our town halls are virtual right now. All of our fundraising is virtual. All of our volunteering is virtual right now. So anywhere you are in Texas or honestly the world, you could help literally. If you're sitting in Singapore right now, you could be doing the exact same kind of help as somebody sitting over in Friendswood or Katy. It really doesn't matter. So you all have a huge opportunity, and especially because y'all are digital natives. When I was growing up, actually, I didn't have an internet. I didn't have a cell phone when I was a kid. Y'all have the biggest opportunity to make bold change because you are perfectly adapted to a world where the only way we can communicate is virtually. So the sky's the limit. As creative as you can be with your Zooms, with your online rooms, as creative as you can be in terms of getting out the vote, in terms of registering people, in terms of mobilizing people, all online. Those are the people that are going to thrive in this kind of environment. It's a crisis, but in any crisis, we can find opportunities. The people who rise to the challenge, those are the ones who are going to make the biggest change. And I'm excited about the changes that are going to come out of this crisis this year.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I'm also extremely excited. Like, as you've seen, like, we've had to shift our entire climate movement online, less than a month, get all of these Earth Day Live things organized. And, you know, it's really been amazing to talk with like future elected officials like yourself and like other existing elected officials to see that like everyone now is moving online and we're becoming more inclusive because we get to reach out to those people who we may not have knocked those doors on. So for all of these new people who are coming in and for the people who have been here since the very beginning, how do we hold elected officials or future elected officials like yourself accountable to make sure that they keep pushing on climate and that they don't give up on us and that they don't turn out to be like anti-climate and against our interests? How do we hold you guys accountable?
Sure. So, I mean, obviously in a normal scenario, people do things like they organize protests, you know, physically in an area. And that can't be done right now. But I'll tell you the truth, a little secret. In Washington, what they do is they count. They count number of letters, they count number of emails, they count number of phone calls to see which way the wind is blowing on a certain issue. And one of the differences that I had between me and our current congressman is that I had committed to doing a town hall every single month. So we weren't just counting emails, but everybody within the district would have a chance to see me face to face and ask me those questions directly, because I think it's important, whether you want to yell at me or not. You could be Republican, Democrat, vote for me or not, but I think that's really important in an elected representative. But a lot of these members of Congress, they don't want to do that. They don't want to face their constituents. So they don't hold these town halls. And right now it's a bit harder because you have to build up that pressure in a virtual way. They don't have to face people if they're holding signs or surrounding their office or trying to visit them in their office. But you can build up massive movements online. And I say this again, I'm going to put this back on y'all, because when you sign a petition, you know, there's change.org petitions, you build up pressure, but there's probably other ways of building pressure online. What the kids in Parkland did after that, what the March for Our Lives movement did, is something that I would not have predicted. Because when I saw Sandy Hook, you know, when I saw Las Vegas, I thought if we can have these kind of massive tragedies and Congress won't do anything, right? Industry won't do anything, then maybe there's nothing we can ever do about this problem. But I was wrong. And when you saw the way that young folks were organizing much better than adults, the way they put pressure, and then the way that I knew that they were actually having an impact is when you saw financial divestment. When you hurt somebody in their wallet, that's when it counts. You saw company after company making changes after the March for Our Lives movement started. You saw this past year in Congress, for the first time in 20 years, we actually had funding for research on gun violence. Before that, the NRA would block even doing research on how to bring down gun violence, and that's changing now. That's the power that young people have in their hands to put that pressure on elected officials and to get people elected to office. Because the truth is that wouldn't have happened if not for the elections of 2018. So I think there's a big opportunity for young people if they want to build up that pressure online, and if they want to use their skills to go and help be more creative. So for example, in our campaign, anybody out there who wants to help us expand our presence on social media, who actually wants to talk about these issues, to be surrogates for us, to connect with people around the country who feel the exact same way, y'all can do it. We want to take our lead from you. If you have good ideas, we don't want to keep inside the box. So please join our campaign. Go on our website, it's shri2020.com. Send an email to us at info@shri2020.com. Connect with our organizing director and tell us, this is my idea on how to connect more people on the issue of climate change. But literally, the sky is the limit. And right now, we're only bound by our imagination because everything is online.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm kind of sad that our session is coming to a close, but before we go, are there any last statements you would like to make to our viewers out there?
So first of all, I want to thank you, Vidya, for putting this on and for all of the hard work, the leadership that you and your classmates have put into increasing civic engagement and activism. And I say that with all seriousness because when I was your age, I tried to do this with my own classmates. I tried to start a youth voting league with people who were all turning 18 and try to get them all registered to vote. And the momentum just wasn't there for my generation. It just wasn't. Your generation is different, and it's leaders like you and the folks that are out there who are watching this right now who have that power in their hands. So my message to you, it's the same message that I said earlier. If you want to break this system apart, if you want to tear this down and build something bigger and better, you have that power right now. In fact, you are more empowered than some of the adults out here who probably can't think as expansively. All of the great innovations in science in our history have mainly come from people under the age of 30. It's true. Go look it up. All of these folks like Isaac Newton, who invented calculus during a plague. That is the challenge that I'm putting out to y'all. If you can imagine a better world, let's start building it right now together.
Absolutely. So I hope all of you viewers take Shri up on his challenge and, keep staying with us, stay with our climate movement, keep calling our elected officials. Yesterday on Thursday, we did our divestment phone bank, and we are so happy that all of you have joined us today. This is really a historic movement. This will go down in all of our history books, and our children will be forced to read about us. So thank you so much to Mr. Shri Kulkarni for joining us. We appreciate you so much. We appreciate your time, and best of luck in Texas 22. We not only hope that you win your race, but we will be supporting you in that as well. So thank you so much.
Now, thank you, Vidya. And those of y'all that want to follow us on social media, you can follow us on Facebook at Shri for Congress 2020. You can follow us on Twitter at Shri P. Kulkarni. You can follow us on Instagram at Shri for Congress 2020. Or if you want to help us start a TikTok, I'd be happy to have your help too. So once again, thank you, Vidya, and thank you to everybody out there who's actually putting your heart and soul into making a positive change.
Absolutely. Our next speaker will be Diana Martinez Alexander. She is currently running for Harris County Commissioner Precinct 3, which stretches up from Belair through East Katy, covers Cypress, and extends near Prairie View. Diana is a passionate educator, activist, organizer, and community voice that has been working in our community for many years. Diana is a first-generation immigrant born here in Harris County and is outspoken about issues that matter to Houstonians, such as the danger of a citizenship question on the census, the I-45 expansion, and unity against white nationalism and hatred. Diana is also one of the few candidates who has been endorsed by Sunrise Houston as a candidate prioritizing climate. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us to our Friday Earth Day Live talking about voting. Today with us here, we have Diana Martinez Alexander. She is a passionate educator, activist, organizer, and community voice who has been working in our community for many, many years. She is a first-generation immigrant born here in Harris County and running for Harris County Commissioner Precinct 3, which stretches from Belair up through East Katy, covering Cypress, and extends near Prairie View. So Diana has taken a firm stance on issues that matter to Houstonians, releasing numerous public statements regarding the damaging effect of the citizenship question on the census, the danger of the I-45 expansion, and unity against white nationalism and hatred. So thank you so much, Diana, for joining us today. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your campaign.
Sure. So I decided after the November election in 2016 that simply being a dedicated voter wasn't enough. I mean, I voted in all of the elections, like even bond elections, school board elections, and I thought my voice made a difference, but I realized that I had a greater potential for impacting change in the community as a volunteer voter registrar. I got involved in numerous community grassroots organizing groups to change policy, to pressure politicians because they work for us. And then I realized further as I grew into leadership positions that all of my experience as an educator, as a mom, as a planner, all helped me gather the expertise needed to be an effective representation for our community. And so I wanted to make sure that I'm able to help uplift our community, which has been traditionally underserved, in places where our voices need to be heard, and that was Commissioner's Court. So I'm really excited that we were the front runner in the campaign, in the election in March. I was kind of worried about what was going to happen with the primary runoff. So we'll see, because it's been moved to July, we'll see kind of how that plays out.
Absolutely. Best of luck in that. So
Thank you.
I think you really made one of those defining points of that after 2016 election was when a lot of us actually became involved. That was a huge surge of people getting into activism, figuring out what issues they cared about. Mm-hmm. So I really relate to that because that was also, I was in 8th grade then, and I very clearly remember that. And so after that, the rest of 8th grade and all of high school was just activism and getting involved and making change. So yes. Let's talk a little bit about climate action.
Okay.
Diana, you have listed before that climate action is one of your top priorities, and it's been listed first on your website. Why is that?
Because if we don't change the policy regarding the climate crisis, really nothing else matters. We're looking at a world that has been linked internationally with different countries, and so whatever happens in another country impacts us. But here in Harris County, we have the potential to change mass transit opportunities, to influence green policy through our businesses, and make sure that for our community, since we have been devastated by storms like Harvey, and it's really not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. So we need to be proactive in creating a climate crisis plan for the county so we can coordinate with other governmental entities and make sure we're doing all that we can to preserve green space, to be thoughtful about development, like I said, to develop more mass transit and make decisions in our infrastructure that make sense with the climate crisis in mind.
Yeah, and I think you just touched a little bit on this in your answer, but the next question is, when we think of climate action as a whole, we generally tend to default to thinking about federal level action. It's always easy to talk about headliners like the Green New Deal. We're a little bit unique in Houston because recently we've been embroiled in a really fierce discussion about the city of Houston's Houston Climate Action Plan. So that's a little bit more on a local level. However, you did mention a countywide action plan, but I feel that's rarely discussed in the context of Houston citywide action and also national level action. And you are running for County Commissioner Precinct 3, and county commissioners are generally responsible for issuing bonds, managing roads, and collaborating with other cities on construction projects. What exactly can you and other county officials do to act on climate change?
So not only do we have a role in that type of infrastructure and those decisions, but we can also influence as an employer and encourage businesses and our own employees to follow certain guidelines when it comes to being green. Now that people are working from home, we can see the potential in that and figure out where it works and where it doesn't work to cut down on transportation for our employees. But countywide, we can create incentives for employers to have more green policies in their workplaces. But also, we can make decisions as far as transportation. We play a role in deciding what type of transportation we're going to focus on in the county, of course, in conjunction with federal entities and with other governmental entities that are local. So it takes a lot of coordination and communication, but if you don't put it as a priority and start those conversations, you're not going to get anywhere. So it's really important that we have somebody on the commissioner's court that's going to frame decisions on being green and advancing climate change policy in a way that hasn't been done before.
Absolutely. So what can we do as young people, as activists, as voters, as people who care about making climate change a frontline issue? What can we do to really support some of that countywide climate action? So for the Houston Climate Action Plan, we have been calling in and leaving comments on that and making sure that our city officials know that we care about it. But what can we do to support countywide action?
So you definitely want to hold all of the county commissioners accountable for those decisions. If there's a potential to make decisions that would be better for the environment, better to reduce carbon footprint, any of those issues, hold them accountable. So I expect that I work for the community, and so what that means to me is that whenever I make a decision, I'm going to frame it in what is best for the community, not for re-election, not for developers. And so you have to really think about all the decisions that are made and what priorities they show their priorities, right? So you hold them accountable, you keep communicating about what the change that you want to have. And then of course you support candidates who are on that path.
Absolutely. So here in Houston, it's a little bit weirder, I would say, for elections, specifically in Texas. We live in the energy capital of the entire world. And, oil and gas money goes really, really far here, alongside the fact that many Houstonians are employed by the oil and gas industry.
Yes.
And thus a lot of candidates and elected officials, especially in the greater Houston area, more in surrounding counties and in Harris, but many of them are reluctant to make climate action a central part of their campaigns. But you, on the other hand, have gotten a hard-earned endorsement from Sunrise Houston for your strict stance on climate. How are you making climate change a winning issue here in Houston and here in Texas?
Well, the thing is when you talk to voters and you talk to people in the community, their number one concern is flooding. And so getting them to understand the connection between the short-term problem that's immediately facing them of recovering from flooding, and then the long-term solution, which is creating a better infrastructure that we don't have to rely on cars, we don't have to sit in traffic. Those types of things, once you sit and talk to people, they start to make that connection. And I do understand the pressure that people feel because of the connection to the oil and gas industry. However, I see it as a potential solution when you have all of this business expertise and capital. And why are we not leveraging that along with all of the academic resources that we have in our area to be leaders in green technology and really be, instead of Harris County being victims, we're ahead of the game. So that's why I want to shift the conversation, and people will feel better psychologically because they're afraid of the next storm. They get nervous every time we have a bad forecast, projected, and they have that fear mindset. And so if we change that to say, no, this is what we're doing, then people actually feel like they're part of the solution and not just bystanders, watching something happen to them.
Absolutely. I completely agree. And I think that like the fear and trauma from a lot of the climate induced disasters that have happened in Houston is just really palpable. You can see it when you see our city. You can see the water lines on the trees, on our fences, in our homes, the areas that are still underdeveloped and still like have not been fixed after Harvey, even though that happened years ago. And I think that you've definitely addressed like one of the main concerns of Houstonians is like not only flooding, but how do we come back? How do we make sure that we go forward? Do you think that other candidates and other elected officials are really hearing this message like you are?
I think there are a handful of people who aren't afraid to say those, to understand where we're coming from and start connecting the dots for their constituents in a real way. And so I think the more conversations that we have, the more storms that we have. I mean, just the other day we had hail and I couldn't even look outside because I knew that, maybe my car is getting damaged, but all of these, storms intensifying. And I even talked to somebody before the primary who is washing their dishes in a bathtub because they haven't gotten their house fixed after Harvey. So if we're not addressing the needs of the people who are underserved and haven't been able to recover, the next disaster is just around the corner. And with the increased stress of COVID-19, I feel like this is something we really need to address. And even though we have other concerns, we need to stay focused on addressing the climate crisis as well. That can't be far from our minds.
Absolutely. We completely agree with you. To transition to our theme for today, which is voting, as you know, one of the biggest changes in focus of the climate movement recently is transitioning to emphasize voting. So we hope to not only strike and divest, which are Wednesday and Thursday's actions, but also campaign and vote. So after speaking with Tree Kulkarni running for Texas 22, he says that he's hopeful for a surge of voters in November, but not just any voters. He's hopeful for a surge of voters under 25, youth voters who have historically not turned out in the way that other age groups have. Do you share his optimism?
I do. I actually have my daughter who, this is going to be her first presidential election that she'll be able to vote in. And I listened to her talk about her and her friends. They are politically connected. They talk about politics even when adults aren't around, you know what I mean? So I feel hopeful in the fact that they take an interest because they see how these issues of the climate crisis, of global warming, and just fear of a financial breakdown because of our reliance on, very toxic tenets of capitalism, are infiltrating their possibility for a bright future. So I see that those sentiments, and I want to make sure that they have the power. They know that they have the power to impact that change by using their voice. I wonder about their are they able to separate local politics from national politics if they have some worries about who's on the presidential ticket. I worry about that and I wonder about that, but I'm hoping that we have enough communication with people who are younger to let them know that these local elections can make a huge change in their communities. You know, as far as education about access to clinics in the community, all sorts of things that can help them and help their families.
Absolutely. So given this huge change of situation and the fact that this is really going to be one of like the critical elections of our entire lifetimes, definitely my lifetime, I'm also going to be a first-time presidential voter.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I have my days marked down until I turn 17 in 10 months, so then I can register to vote.
How exciting.
Yeah. So given all of these new situations, what do you think is going to be the biggest influencing factor and deciding factor for voters this November?
I think that people are going to be looking for who is really speaking to their interests, right? So if you look at the news, and most recently, Dan Patrick came out and said that it's not just about living, it's also about getting everything back on track. And that statement is with, and I'm paraphrasing, of course, that statement is loaded with so much privilege, and I am bamboozled and flabbergasted by the audacity that someone can put such little value on people. And I want to make sure that I'm running a campaign that I can be proud of. I look in the mirror, and what I'm standing for is for the right thing. And I can only speak for myself, but if I run that campaign, then I'm already winning, because we're having conversations like this, and people are getting to hear about the underserved, about Black and Brown communities suffering under policies, of years of neglect. And it's coming out now with the COVID-19 crisis and the outbreak, where the gaps are in services. And so this is a time for action. This is a time for moving forward with the intent of making our community better. A society is judged by how it treats its vulnerable, and we can say in our campaign that that is foremost and will always be the concern. Policies affect people, and I hope that that comes clear to the voter.
I completely agree in that, like this time, even though a lot of us are bottled up at home, we're not able to go see like our friends and sometimes even our family. It can be very difficult. And with all of the new circumstances, there come a lot of new challenges that we're going to have to face this November. And so we as a climate movement are taking on the challenge to register new voters in a time when, you know, we can't block walk and go from door to door registering people. So we are actually partnering with Move Texas to register voters online so they can fill out their information, get it printed for them, and then get it sent back so they can sign it, and then they can get registered. But I wanted to ask you about how your campaign has adapted to these new conditions and what measures you think should be put in place to protect our vote this November.
So ultimately, I think vote by mail is critical in this election for both the runoff and in November. And I have some fears that the powers that be are trying to open up the state so they can artificially say that we're ready to go and vote, when it's a health hazard to a great many people in our community. And we want to make sure that we're standing firm against any attempts of voter suppression. We saw what happened in Wisconsin, and unfortunately 19 people have gotten sick, attributed to their vote, going out and voting. So we have to be very aware of what's happening, because I don't foresee that Abbott will be looking for ways to make sure that more people can vote. I think they're trying to limit that as much as they can. The other part of your question was, I'm so sorry.
That's absolutely okay. It's what measures do you think we should put in place to keep our votes safe?
Okay, so oh, and how the campaign has adapted. So what I've been doing are nightly updates, giving information to the community. Last night we talked about ways to volunteer if you have capacity for that. And other nights we've talked to counselors about how to talk to your kids about COVID-19 and the new family dynamic. Another night we talked about how to handle stress because people are dealing with different burdens right now, and we're all trying to figure out our new normal. So each night I take a different topic and help share some good information that's vetted. I'm not an expert in medicine, but I make sure that I get information that is verified because there is a lot of bad information out there. And so even though I can't go door to door and talk to people, at least I'm sharing information on my campaign page that is valuable and maybe brings people hope. It might be funny if, my dog starts to bark in the middle of it. It's real, it's me. And so that's what I've been doing. I hope that we'll be able to start sending letters and notes to people, but I want to make sure that we have it's kind of reframing how campaigning is done because people get a lot from interaction. And when you remove that from the equation, it makes it difficult. So I think each candidate is finding their way.
Absolutely. And for our viewers who are interested in getting access to your nightly talks, your nightly briefings, how would they find that?
So I'm on Instagram, D Alexander 2020. I'm on Twitter as well, Diana Alexander 2020, and also Facebook. So I share them on all three of those platforms.
All right, that sounds amazing. That concludes the questions on my part. Is there anything else that you'd like to address?
No, I'm just really thankful that I got to take the time to talk to you and that Sunrise Movement is continuing to work to register voters. That's really important to me, and I'm just glad. Keep it up. It's awesome.
Absolutely. We're so thankful to have you here talking with us. Thank you so much for your hard work in our community, doing what you do, and keep on persevering out there. We will be supporting you not only in July, but also in November. And so we really, really hope to have you in office so that you can advance our interests and really help out our community. Thank you so much for your time.
I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
You've heard her say before, we shall overcome. Well, the statement is true. I've studied this application through and through. What I've discovered is that the process starts with you. Now, I'm not trying to be deep or metaphorical, but the phrase is allegorical. Like Egypt, we can be plagued by looking at fathers, brothers, sisters, mothers, and all others as the cover reason for our lack of familial cohesion. In other words, our historical duct tapes aren't in a row, yet we wonder why we can't stick together. Well, you take out the why, doesn't this work for me? And the oppressive perspective of pride, you're left with you. So why can't we end the divide? Well, because we won't look inside. We've let past time become pastimes. This causes our hearts to ache until they flatline. The effect, it leaves us all cold. We verbally abuse each other and think that's called bold. We say that we don't know that we're wrong. I'm not sold. We'll say things like, yo, who you talking to? Because you're not talking to me. Because you couldn't possibly be me. Think about it. We can never go through the same things. You weren't treated like a peasant. We don't fight the same kings. But like I before E, we can't seem to see that in this school of life, we keep getting schooled by the same principles. Excuse me. We keep getting schooled by the same principalities as if we don't realize the things that aren't even our realities. Well, what's real? We're really all connected. And not one is greater than the other if we're really all dissected. See, everyone chooses to deny their pride, but really I accept it. Because when I'm real with myself about my feelings, humility is what I'm left with. My battles made me a soldier, and now I'm left right in general form. There's some things I need to set right. We don't die, we multiply. Well, we gonna die if we don't unify. But we need YOUNITY. Now, when this gets hard to see, just remember that you is really me. And then we shall overcome. The statement is true, and you'll see why when you spell unity, YOUNITY. So to conclude, we can't have unity without YOU. Glasses.
Thank you so much to Chuck Wright for that wonderful performance. We are going to be going back to show you our last speaker, who is Natalia Cornelio, and she is running as a Democratic nominee for judge in the 351st District as a proud bilingual Mexican-American attorney of 13 years of criminal and civil justice experience as a federal public defender in Houston. Natalia has drafted judicial opinions for judges in criminal, immigration, and post-conviction cases, litigated complex civil rights cases against the federal government, the state of Texas, and local governments as a director of criminal justice reform at the Texas Civil Rights Project. She has regularly represented clients who only speak Spanish and otherwise would not have had an attorney who speaks their language, and has represented families separated at the US-Mexico border under Trump's zero tolerance policy. Here is our last speaker, Natalia Cornelio.
Hello, everyone. I'm here with Natalia Cornelio in Houston, Texas. My name is Jose Gomez. I'm Director of Communications for the International Indigenous Youth Council, and as well as adult mentor for the Texas chapter of IOIC. We are doing this for the Sunrise Movement Houston chapter and for Earth Day Live. And I go ahead and I wanted to introduce y'all to a good friend of mine. Her name is Natalia Cornelio. And I wanted you to, basically, can you tell us about yourself and why you are running for judge of Harris County?
Yes. Hi, everybody. I'm Natalia Cornelio. My friends call me Nata. My people call me Nata. I'm running for a criminal district court to be a judge of a court in Harris County. It's one of 22 criminal courts on a felony level that serves Harris County. I'm a lawyer. I've been a lawyer for over 13 years, almost 14 years. And my experiences as a lawyer and as a person are what made me want to be a judge. I started off pretty much as a defender, as a public defender. I represented people that had no money and were facing serious charges. I'm a bilingual Latina, and so I also speak Spanish, and I was able to serve and represent a lot of people who don't speak English, only speak Spanish, which is a lot of people charged with crimes who can't afford a lawyer in southern Texas, in Houston, in federal court, which is where I was. And, you know, my experiences there were, there's two things that you get out of it. One is really serving the person, you know, that you are representing, and listening to them, making them feel heard, and making sure that they have all the information that they need to make really important decisions. And then there's also advocating for them. And my experience was that there were judges that made decisions about our people that had a lot of power over their lives, and some of them were good. And a lot of times there was a complete lack of compassion or understanding for the experience of the human being that was impacted by the decision of these judges. So that's really what made me want to run. Before I decided to run for judge, I became a civil rights lawyer and did a similar, I decided I wanted to change out of being a defender, and I wanted to talk about the system differently, and challenge it, encourage it to change and become better. And similarly, you know, I saw people with power and in leadership roles, and to me, sometimes I felt a lack of urgency in meeting the needs of the community and understanding the needs of the community. And so I find myself here wanting to step up and be a leader and make a difference from a position of power, frankly, that oftentimes people that look like us don't have. There are zero Latinas, brown women on the criminal courts in Harris County. And there are a total of 38 criminal courts. And Harris County is almost 50% Latinx. So that's crazy.
Wow. What would you say your platform is? How would you describe it, the one you're running on?
Improving the justice system by making sure that the needs of the people impacted by it are accounted for in the decisions that are made. You know, I firmly believe that the law does protect people's rights as something, and it protects people. It's supposed to be a tool for people to have protections, and we just need leaders to understand what that looks like for different communities. So my platform is to always think about and have empathy for whoever I'm making a decision about. And to always study, to always read the law, to always study and make sure that everybody feels completely heard. I've been a lawyer. Some judges, sometimes we felt like they didn't read or hear or maybe even understand anything that we said. So there's a human aspect, and then the just like, hey, did you do your research? Because we did. We're fighting here based on all this research. Are you giving our argument a chance? And that's my platform, is to be open and make smart decisions that are thoughtful.
Beautiful. So why do you think criminal justice is an important issue, specifically for Black and Indigenous communities?
Yeah, I mean, Black and Indigenous and Brown communities are hit the hardest. The criminal justice system, unfortunately, as it's gotten bigger and bigger, or maybe always, disproportionately affects people of color. In Harris County, African-American community is hit hard. I mean, 50% of the jail population is African-American today, out of the almost 8,000 people that are in jail, or 7,000 people that are in jail today. And it's about 19% African-American in Harris County. So that's a big disparity. And then my work was in federal court. And so the immigrant population specifically, I mean, immigration status, a lot of people don't know this, but it's criminalized. And not only do folks go to immigration detention and have proceedings or not to get deported, but before that, if the government can criminally charge people with being here illegally or coming here illegally after being deported. And people face up to 20 years in prison, depending on the circumstances, for just being here illegally. So that hits, our communities hard. It permeates. It kind of perpetuates a culture that has an impact on Black and Brown and Indigenous people's ability to get ahead and build community in the healthy, thriving way that we need to.
Thank you. So living in Houston, running for Harris County Judge, like Houston is an area that is often flooded and threatened by hurricanes, as you know. Could you explain how climate change threatens the criminal justice system in your district?
Yeah. So my environmental, like my climate environment studies I am so entrenched in the criminal justice system that's really my focus. So I'll give an example. Every time Houston floods, our jails and our prisons are in crisis, right? The sanitation levels that are so important right now during this pandemic right now, it's very hard to maintain and keep people safe. And I just think that if I can back up, something that this pandemic is really showing us is how intertwined everything is. The climate, our environment, the way we treat our Mother Earth, public health, criminal justice, it's all intertwined. There have been massive efforts, for example, to reduce the jail population because we have to control or mitigate against really dangerous spreading of COVID-19. And I think, we've learned so much about how we need to take care of ourselves and our earth better, to be safe and against, it's a big question, but, jail is a public health crisis and it's all environmental. People in jail don't get a lot of sunlight. It's a lot of shared space. There are toilets that don't have lids. There's not access to water the way that we get to have it, and don't, take advantage of it or don't treat our water well. But, there's not access to fresh air. There's not access to, we're both danzantes, to being able to move freely in a space. And I think that just knowing about the justice system and how harsh the consequences are on the people and then their people, really, there's such a clash between what we know that helps our communities thrive in general and what we do with our justice system on such a massive scale. So I don't know if that answered your question, but that's how I think about not necessarily climate change, but, earth work that folks have to do and that permeates all of our communities and all of our practices and institutions.
Thank you. Yeah, that does. So do you think you could please give us any insight of what is going on inside the jails currently at this time during the COVID-19 pandemic? And maybe what conversations are you having with these people you represent and their families at this time?
Yeah. I work for the county right now, and a lot of different leaders throughout the county and in other places are being very proactive at having people come out because the doctors have spoken. They're really guiding our social practices right now, how we're acting, why we're on Zoom right now instead of in person. And the doctors have said, hey, jails are exactly this virus's party. It's people in close quarters. There's low sanitation. There's no distancing. And then there's also changing populations constantly. And it's a lot of people. So new people come in every day. Our Harris County Jail, for example, has roughly 3,000 people that work there, either that are sheriffs or counselors or doctors or contractors. And they're going in and out of the jail back to our community, and so anything in the jail that happens could be bad. It could be brought in from the outside and could come back out easily because there's so much movement. And so really the pandemic has forced people to recognize that we need to reduce the jail population. Our sheriff in Harris County has done a ton. The county judge, Lina Hidalgo, has done a ton to try to encourage it. A lot of our leaders have done that. I know that it's not enough for people that, have families or community that haven't gotten out, and it's really scary. I know that our leaders are doing the best that they can. Unfortunately, it has meant, there's a lot of people in isolation and quarantine. There was even a story recently that juveniles, because they didn't know how to handle the lack of distance, they were put in basically solitary for almost 2 weeks here in Harris County. And so those are the kinds of conditions that without better planning on what to do when we face circumstances like this, we have really extreme responses to these emergencies that have a lot of damaging consequences. Keeping people in isolation and quarantine, not in their homes, not with an easy access to help, is really scary and really dangerous. So I know that there are a lot of efforts, and I know that they need to be better. And now, continuing through once this is over, we need to just constantly assess what's going to be our responses to these types of emergencies. Maybe we haven't had a pandemic, but we've had floods that have caused the jail and courts to close down. And so we really need to get ahead of it and plan for it and accommodate and reduce the population so that there aren't as many people that we have to take care of in emergency that, you know, that it just puts us in everybody in a bad situation.
Thank you. So there's one more question I did have for you that I was curious to hear what your opinion is or insight. So there are some, working with IRYC, I've come across a lot of radical indigenous youth and brown youth and Black youth, and really like the front lines of trying to change our world. And I've noticed some of the ones that are like a bit younger, like below under 21, are but still above 18, old enough to vote. They're so disheartened by the system that they don't even want to promote voting. They don't want to vote. They think it's a scam, or they think their voice isn't really going to be heard, that the system is rigged, etc. Like, what would you say to those youth as like somebody who's running for judge?
Yeah, I mean, that's why I'm running. I'm a danzante, right? Like we were saying, and I don't know that there is a danzante judge out there. I know there's some danzante lawyers, and it's just an example. We can be our government when we vote, and even though the president's race gets a ton of attention, there are so many local elections that have such a big impact on these issues. It's not everything, but it's so much that it's worth it. You know, these judges make thousands of decisions for criminal sentences, for people's bonds, for how fair their trials are or aren't, for making sure whether or not people know the immigration consequences of their situations. The district attorney is elected. She or he makes the charging decisions on our justice system. We have sheriff elections, constable elections. We have a county attorney elections that does like environmental prosecutions. We have people that control the money locally. And they do respond to local voices. So I think that even though, you know, maybe you're not excited about Biden or Trump or your choices up there, but, you know, it's on us, it's on all of us to get to know each other and figure out, maybe we do know somebody that's running, or maybe somebody that stands for something that can make a difference is running, and change takes a long time.
Thank you so much, Nata.
Yeah.
Is there anything last that you would like to say about you or your campaign or in general?
Thank you for listening to me. I wish we could talk in person. I wish we could have a danza and then a conversation. I miss being with everybody. I've been spending a lot of time outside. I know you didn't really ask about that, but I'm Natalia Cornelio. I'm running for judge. I'm really excited to bring a different perspective to our leaders, to bring urgency and compassion and some experience of actually working with people affected by the leaders' decisions. So I hope that, you know, it motivates you to get to know, if you're not here in Harris County, about other folks that are running where you live. And if you're here or if you're not, reach out to me anytime. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I have a website, nataliacornelio.com. And I would love to connect with you, share music with me, share drum beats with me. Let's talk.
Thank you so much, Natalia Cornelio, everybody.
Thanks, Jose.
All right, and that wraps up our 11 a.m. live stream. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to our speakers, Stephanie Gomez, Sri Kulkarni, Diana Martinez-Alexander, and Natalia Cornelio for joining us. Thank you to our amazing writers block, Gabrielito, Luz Gomez, and Chuck Wright for performing for us, and Jose for representing the interests of our Indigenous youth. They're a real frontline community. Thank you to you viewers who have tuned in and stayed with us. And don't forget to check out our 6 p.m. teach-in on the Houston Climate Action Plan. It's going to be really exciting. We're going to be speaking to some city council members and talking about the newly released Houston Climate Action Plan. Thanks for viewing.